More and more people do not trust banks. They don't trust the paper dollar. There's a lot of good economic reasons why they shouldn't trust the U.S. dollar. We've been kind of lucky in some respects over the last many years, but that I think is changing for the worst.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for June 23rd through June 30th, 2025, while supplies last. This week we feature 1-ounce silver backdated Australian kangaroos at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. And with the Australian Kangaroo Monster Box at just 250 ounces, these are some of the lowest priced monster boxes on the market. Next, backdated platinum 1-ounce Australian platypus coins are just $119 over spot. And 1 10th-ounce Canadian maple leaves are only $45 over melt per coin. And finally, constitutional silver dealer's choice dimes and quarters are just 99 cents over spot per ounce. Again, some of the lowest premiums we've seen on silver in years. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and back with us today is our good friend Dr. Mark Thornton from the Mises Institute. Dr. Thornton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Elijah, it's great to be back on the program.
Well, it's great to have you today. I did want to discuss what is happening geopolitically. We're recording this on Monday, and obviously over the weekend, we saw U.S. strike Iran after Israel got involved there. Your perspective on what's happening right now, a little bit of retaliation, unsuccessful from Iran there. What is your take on the current geopolitical climate?
Well, it's very, very unfortunate. I did a podcast episode, as you know, on June 7th about preparing for war and the way the world is going in this direction with trade wars and building up of militaries and threatening actions by politicians. And this is just one of the possible outcomes of all that. Now, I'm not a geopolitical theorist or analyst or anything of the kind, but I know enough to know that this is a fruitless, potentially very dangerous endeavor because we know we have evidence that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. They do not have a nuclear bomb or any ways of conveying that. Their military assets are of a much smaller nature, but we do know that Iran is allied with Russia and China. And so you're mixing the United States in with a squabble of a small country with genocidal tendencies. I'm speaking of Israel. And we're doing their bidding, really, and we're putting the American taxpayer and the American citizen at risk, really, not just from Iran and what they might do in the region or what they might try to inflict on the American people directly and our allies, of course, but all of the economic harm that's possible with these kind of scenarios. And also the implications of involving Russia and China, which are major military powers that I talked about, and of course nuclear superpowers. And so this is a very dangerous path. And one of the things I tried to do in that episode on June 7th was to show that trade wars, these political manipulations, these military buildups, these confrontations of various levels, that all of these things can spiral out of control beyond the control of any politician, political party, or nation. And so that's why normal, rational people always urge extreme caution in all of these matters, because of the inability to control the situation where you're involving many, many different nations all at once, and then all of the people in those nations. So it's a very dangerous path. It has a very limited objective, and even if you grant the politicians in control in the United States everything that they say, there's no value really in the end for the American people that's real and tangible. And there's a whole lot of danger. The only people who can profit from this are people who resupply the ammunition for the United States and Israel and other parties involved in this dangerous game.
No, the narrative is that the U.S. is getting involved because we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But you mentioned that Iran doesn't have near to the capacity to create a nuclear weapon right now. So did you want to get into that, some of the details there, why this narrative that's being pushed by the mainstream media is false?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Iran would like to have nuclear weapons the way Israel has them illicitly. Our history of regime change in the region and around the world would make anybody want to have that kind of ultimate weapon, but basically they're under multi-levels of inspection that prevent them, and the evidence suggests that they're conforming to the stipulations, or at least they were conforming to the stipulations of the agreements about non-proliferation, so that they could enrich uranium to a certain level, but they couldn't make bomb-quality uranium, and they couldn't develop the facilities to make bombs or to deliver bombs. So that, I have friends that are much more knowledgeable about this than I am, and they believe that the oversight is reasonably correct and reasonably well informed, given that it's multi-level. In other words, we're not depending upon individuals to tell us one thing or another, but even the administration's own players in this multi-level surveillance and curtailment effort have told the administration that they're at least 2 years away from developing any kind of deliverable bomb. And my sources, my friends, who I know are much more knowledgeable about this and familiar with this, certainly, they believe that assessment is correct. So our own administration believes that they are at least 2 years away from developing a bomb that could attack Israel, more or less, not the United States, and that they were not at this time of Israel's attack and our subsequent attack, that they hadn't even proceeded down that pathway at this point in time. So, I think it's imperative that the administration explain themselves, which they don't seem to be willing to do. But they given the fact that they're putting all Americans and all of our allies at risk, I think an explanation should be forthcoming.
Where do you see this leading? Because some people think, this could just fizzle out from here, hopefully. But it has the potential to really escalate to World War III. As you mentioned, Iran's allies being China and Russia there. So some of the biggest nuclear powers in the world. Your perspective on that, where could this lead?
I'm hopeful that it dissipates. Markets are hopeful that it is dissipating already, that someone needed to throw a tantrum, and the tantrum may be over, and the coast may be clear in the short run. But these processes that lead to highly destructive wars, again, these are outside the control of any one individual. This is an interaction of all the world's most powerful, most dangerous states, governments, and there's no telling about how they end up, what the path of those things are. And so it's imperative at every juncture that every nation behaves morally and rationally and works to diminish the chances of it devolving into a tragedy of a world war, because that's absolutely not going to serve anybody's interest, including the government. They say that, health, that the war is to the health of the state. But another world war with nuclear weapons is not to anybody's interest at all. And so we have to remain vigilant. People need to consider this question above all other questions when they vote and when they participate. If they do participate in politics, they need to consider this issue in particular. And I think people are. I mean, I've heard so many people who were supporters of the Trump and the MAGA movement and how coldly they've dropped President Trump. Marjorie Taylor Greene, right before I came into the studio here at the Mises Institute, I noticed there was a tweet from her how she was essentially slapping the president's actions directly in the face as an affront to the citizens that she represents, the Trump supporters that she represents, her children and her grandchildren, and the future of the country. So this is something that needs to be taken on. And of course, we have to take account of it right here today. We have to protect ourselves in whatever ways possible, because a nuclear war or any kind of world war is dangerous and destructive. But economically, of course, it's the worst possible policy that a government and politicians can embark on. So our wealth is also in danger. It's not just our health and our lives, but our wealth. Anything short of the ultimate disaster is going to be disastrous for our wealth positions as well.
Now, bringing in economics here, you recently stated in your recent minor video there, I wanted to get your perspective on this with respect to battles of monetary control. You say that battles of monetary control are a leading cause of war. So how does this tie back into economics as well? And why is economics and the control over monetary systems really the leading cause of this?
Well, you just look back at history and you see, even our revolution and our Constitution, the founding fathers wanted to wrest control of their monetary affairs away from Britain. And that's when they set out and established right from the get-go a gold standard with gold and silver serving as money. So, right from our founding principles, and of course, even going back in time, that's also the case. But World War I was, our Federal Reserve was founded right before that and helped finance World War I from the U.S. perspective. World War II, in which the United States and the Allies were victorious, well, we set up the Bretton Woods system, where the U.S. became not just an economic powerhouse and not just a military powerhouse, but they controlled the world monetary system. And right now, of course, Russia is naturally bucking the U.S. dollar system because of Joe Biden's confiscation of their assets. China and the BRICS countries are seeking an alternative monetary system. China is very jealous of the U.S. dollar as a trading currency and as a central bank reserve currency. It wants its own currency used in international trade, which it's implementing. And it wants Chinese government bonds used as central bank reserve assets. So that's what it wants. That's why we're essentially in conflict. We're in a new age of mercantilism, where countries are battling one another, not just militarily, but economically, with their monetary systems and with their paper dollars, their paper money, and so that's really where we are right now. And President Trump does understand that, but he doesn't have the right solution. We could declare an armistice and a peace in our day with the reestablishment of a gold standard in the United States. But every time there's a big war or a revolution, there's a big change in the monetary system. And sometimes this is on a smaller scale, but it can be on a much larger, grander scale. And usually it's for the worse. Usually the system gets worse. But it can get better. And I'm actually, optimistic about our future that we could pull off eventually a reestablishment of a gold standard-like system that's more or less privately controlled beyond the purview largely of government. So we're talking about a lot of negative things, a lot of bad things, but I want to say that I'm very optimistic and have become more optimistic as more and more of my fellow citizens are better informed about the nature of government. And, the fact that so many people today do not trust the U.S. government and do not trust U.S. politicians and think that they're being scammed. And, when I was a kid, that was a very small group of people. And now it's a very, very large group of people. And the fact that, the one great thing about Trump's attack on Iran and his breaking with his base on his number one campaign promise is that a huge segment of Americans now have gotten tremendous reinforcement that the control of our government is really kind of beyond their control. And even President Trump has gone back on his promises. And I can't for the life of me explain why, but and the end result is that more and more American citizens completely do not trust the government. They're not like looking at the government do something and then saying, well, I wonder why they're doing it or if it's a good or bad thing. They just don't trust their politicians and they just assume the worst. They assume that people are getting paid off and that the cost of that's going to go on to them, the taxpayer.
We are seeing, obviously, big moves in gold over the last, year and a half or so. And you've talked about how gold is really a gauge of danger out there in the world. And we definitely see that today. But I guess in, as you say, kind of an optimistic way as well, it could be a gauge in, are people returning to gold possibly as money? So do you think that's part of it? We're seeing central banks accumulate gold at very... at a really record pace here over the last few years. So do you think that could be part of it, is that central banks around the world and possibly even the U.S. as well are recognizing that gold has to play a role in the monetary system of the future?
Absolutely. More and more people do not trust banks, which are highly regulated by the government, supposedly supported by the government. They don't trust the paper dollar. There's a lot of good economic reasons why they shouldn't trust the U.S. dollar. We've been kind of lucky in some respects over the last many years, but that I think is changing for the worst. And I think the best informed, the best and brightest of the citizens are really waking up to that fact, and they are protecting themselves with gold and silver and all sorts of other types of adjustments they make in their economic lives. Everything from the size of the house they live in to what profession they get into, where they choose to live. All of those things can be informed by the fact that the government is really committed to an inflationary regime where they spend way, way, way too much money, and the Federal Reserve monetizes the resulting debt, and then the money flows through the system, and they end up paying higher prices as a result of our government giving out money to welfare recipients and arms dealers and all sorts of contracts that we saw given out by the government that Doge uncovered. The list really goes on, and into the multi-trillions of dollars. And Americans are finding out for the first time that the rising prices, the reason their auto insurance bill went up so much, is ultimately the result of the government just giving away money in Washington, D.C. in order to try to get people to vote for them. And so that system is at least starting to come unraveled. And I think it's a great sign. And of course, now central banks are also investing in gold too, because they don't trust other governments. So, I mean, this lack of distrust is really spreading. And ultimately, that's going to play into the monetary metals, primarily gold and silver, but the precious metals we've seen come up off the floor, platinum and palladium and a few others. And in commodities in general, I expect to do, well as we move forward into this area, because, I mean, our government has indicated no restraint whatsoever on its spending. I mean, they're committing to much more spending, they want a much higher national debt ceiling level, and they want to borrow trillions and trillions of dollars every year. The Europeans are jumping on board with that, with a big expansion in Germany and other countries to not shift resources from butter to guns, but just to add more spending, taxes, and national debt to their economies. So it's headed in that direction, but people are, moving in the direction of the real economy, and that means, real things, real, commodities in particular. I'm wearing my copper-colored tie here today, but that's the way I see it. And as dark and as bleak as the current conditions are coming out of Washington, D.C. and other governments, I think that there's a lot of good reasons to be optimistic that so many people now know what to do. They know what the problem is, and they know they're finding out about some of the solutions.
Now, when it comes to gold and silver, last time we had you on, we were talking about the gold-silver ratio and the historic level of 100-to-1, where gold and silver have really never been at that ratio before, except for 2020. Now we're actually correcting a bit. We're a little above 90-to-1 right now for the gold-silver ratio. We've been bumping along 90-to-1 to about 94-to-1 over the last couple of weeks. Your take on this really outperformance in silver that we've seen, and do you think this will continue?
Yeah, the timing of my actions here is no indication of my general ability to predict the future. I must admit that right up front. But yeah, I mean, we did the show on the gold-silver ratio. It was a little over 100, I think, at the time, and it's come down to 90. So it's been a big move down, and it's been more or less consolidating in that range. And, it's possible that it could go back up to and way over 100, depending upon what the governments and central banks do. But I'm actually anticipating central banks being no more of a player in those markets than they are currently. In other words, I don't suspect that they're going to be increasing their purchases of gold. So I don't think that's any more upward pressure on the gold part of the gold-silver ratio. And I think that there are natural tendencies in the market that's going to push the gold-silver ratio down so that silver will continue to outperform gold for quite some time, actually. Now, in the last episode, I talked about the supply side, where a recessionary economy tends to favor a higher silver price because it's not good for the industrial metals. Their businesses don't grow as much, and they can actually shrink. And if they shrink or don't grow, that means they're not, lead mines, zinc mines, copper mines don't contribute any silver, or they contribute less silver into the silver market. So there's a good reason on the supply side. And on the demand side, I think what people are looking for, and they haven't found it yet, but I think what they're going to find is that retail buyers, once price inflation kicks back up, which has been on a short-term decline, at least according to the government statistics, I think that once people start to see in the news that the Fed's fight against inflation isn't working, we saw the value of the dollar today dip below 98. Okay, so the 100 level was a psychological level. It broke through that. Now it's below 98 today. Normally, in these emergency conditions, there's a flight to the dollar, and this is not working out right now. So the dollar is lower, which means commodity prices, world prices of commodities is going to inch up, and that's going to feed into higher consumer prices for Americans, just like the tariff taxes on Americans are going to mean higher prices. And so I think the retail investor is going to be revitalized. And the reason I think that the retail investor is revitalized because, just the nature of buying gold at $3,500 an ounce versus silver at $36 an ounce. And I think the premiums that we have to pay on silver are less in percentage terms, and you can buy a smaller package with lower premiums as silver buyers. The relative price of silver is lower than gold with a very high gold-silver ratio. So I think those kind of shopping list aspects of being involved in this market favors silver over gold on the demand side. So it's got some factors that are going to be forthcoming on the demand side, some factors that I anticipate becoming relevant on the supply side, and therefore I expect the gold-silver ratio to continue to fall.
Well, Mark, we really appreciate your time today. If our viewers are interested in learning more, we'll put a link in the description to your, I believe, weekly videos that you put out here. Did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had?
No, it's great to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. And I encourage everybody to come to our webpage, mises.org. It's really got a ton of information. We have 5 different podcasts. I just do a short, less than 10-minute weekly podcast on Saturday morning where I do a whole lot of things. But of course, I'm interested in gold and silver and those kind of alternatives. So, but we really cover everything in terms of economics, and economics has to do with just about everything in life. So, and we do it in a way that is accessible to people in the general population, and real markets and real people. And so I think everybody should come to the website when you have some time and explore. You can sign up for free articles and notifications of our podcast and a whole bunch of free stuff that's very informative, and you need to be informed about, and you need to be informed by Austrian economists, and people from all over the world write for our page.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Mark Thornton, thank you so much for your time today, and God bless.
Thank you, Elijah.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for June 23rd through June 30th, 2025, while supplies last. This week we feature 1-ounce silver backdated Australian kangaroos at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. And with the Australian Kangaroo Monster Box at just 250 ounces, these are some of the lowest priced monster boxes on the market. Next, backdated platinum 1-ounce Australian platypus coins are just $119 over spot. And 1 10th-ounce Canadian maple leaves are only $45 over melt per coin. And finally, constitutional silver dealer's choice dimes and quarters are just 99 cents over spot per ounce. Again, some of the lowest premiums we've seen on silver in years. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.